When it comes to social environment, social settings, I think the impact of AI and humanoid robots will be limited. So the food is experience. It is not only feeling full. People will visit restaurants, will socialize in cafes, not only to get full, so they will really look for those interactions. And that's why I believe the technology, the AI and humanoid will really bring benefit on the areas that we don't typically see in a day-to-day basis.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Wilco Foods, a podcast at the nexus of hospitality, business, culture, and the mind. Now here's your host, Wilco Foods CEO, Stephen Toberoff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Wilco Foods. I am your host, Stephen Toberoff, and today I'm very much looking forward to a fascinating conversation that intersects with a lot of what we cover here with respect to the hospitality business, but I suspect we're going to go in a multitude of directions beyond that that's going to be equally fascinating and impactful. So without further ado, allow me to introduce my guest, who is Ozan Ozaskinli. Ozan is a food futurist and manufacturing strategist who has spent over 20 years leading transformation projects across 17 industries. Formerly a partner at Boston Consulting Group, Ozan now heads Value Gene Consulting Group, where he helps U.S. manufacturers modernize before tech disruption leaves them behind. He brings a global perspective on how consumer goods and food systems must evolve. Ozan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Devon. Thank you.
So, Ozan, before I jump into the questions that I have, I would love it if you would share with us, please, a bit of your background and how it was that you came to become a futurist and really be focused on this segment of commerce.
I spent about 20 years in consulting, and I work across multiple industries. Then I fully focus on the food industry. I genuinely enjoy the food industry because the cultural experience driven, but also incredibly dynamic and pace changing. Those dynamics really attracted me. And for more than a decade right now, I'm working with food manufacturers and food distributors to really overcome the challenges that they have along their strategy, among their commercial topics or the operational areas as well. And right now, I'm at Value Gene, and we are a boutique consulting firm just focusing on the food value chain. And there are two really topics that I like to talk a lot, which is one of them is future of what we eat, what we will see in our plate in the future, how the food industry will evolve around it, and then future of the food manufacturing. Especially these days, we are talking about humanoid robots and how it will change the way that the food processors work. So those are the topics that really I'm spending most of the time.
So let's just jump into it then. Before we get into those two specific ones, have you given any thought or have you done any consulting in terms of how your perspective on where the world is going to impact restaurants, hotels, caterers, those in the hospitality space? Or is it more focused on retail consumers and products that they're going to buy in the supermarkets and places such as that?
When you work in the food industry, if you are working with the food manufacturers, I think any dynamic in that space has also impact on especially food service business in the restaurant and then the hospitality business as well. And I also see a couple of key areas that really impact the food service part. The first one is really the change that we are seeing today, the healthy dynamic, right? So the healthy industry the healthy claimed foods is really growing across the industry. Well, we recently made a study and it shows that in the last 4 years, the share of the healthy claimed foods increased just 4% in the total market. And the industry of the healthy food in the areas that increased from $200 million to $300 million in just 4 or 5 years. So that has implications in the food service. But more than that, I think that there is another change that is not there yet, but we will start to see soon on the home cooking technology side, which I would like to talk a lot today. Because when we have access an easier way of cooking at home, when we have like chef robots, kitchen robots at our home, I think the interaction with the food will change, and it will also have impact on the food service business as well.
So let's jump into that. With respect to robots that are going to be able to be used for at-home chefs, where are we at, in your view, in that process? And how long until people are deploying these robots at scale, in your opinion? When do you see them start rolling out in a material way?
I think a big part of this change, this disruption, will really start from our kitchen before the food plants, food factories, because the biggest challenge is the time. 1/3 of Americans say that they don't have time to cook. And the single fact is now the bigger barrier of like healthy eating is not only affordability, but also really the time barrier. And I believe the change will start from a narrow applications of the technology in the beginning. What I mean is in 2026, we will start to see some countertop robots that you just provide the ingredient and then you choose the dish that you want, and then it will make the food ready for you when you arrive at home. So it is different than a microwave or oven or a like air fryers. So it has all the ingredients itself, and then it will cook it for you at the time that you want.
Now, when you say cook it, does this device that you're imagining have the capacity to mix ingredients together and prepare them within this device without putting it into an oven or something else and portion it out and do all of that?
Exactly. And I already pre-ordered that one. So there's a company called Nosh, like that we will start to see and scale level in the US as well, starting from April, I believe. And this is exactly works in the way that you mentioned. You prepare the ingredients. So you chop them, prepare them. You put a tray. You put the tray to the machine, and then there is oil, water, seasoning are already in the machine. So you choose the dish that you want, and then you choose the time it wants to be ready, and then it cooks it for you. And the interesting is like they have 500, 600 different recipes already in place. And then you can also create your own recipes. So it gives you really significant amount of like options that maybe you would never cook at your home, but with these technologies, they will become available.
So I could see why that would be attractive to somebody living at home or someone who's busy, such as you're saying. So I don't think these things have to be binary. But what do you say about the notion that preparing food is a sort of a uniquely human experience? It's a way that people can convey a sense of love and appreciation and gratitude to people. To what extent do you think people will simply choose not to disintermediate that experience from their lives because they enjoy it and because it's one of their passions and one of the things that makes them fundamentally human? Again, I understand it's not binary, but what are your thoughts on that dynamic and how it might impact your vision of the future?
I truly agree your point. Food eventually is culture. It's experience. It's not just the convenient or not only the health. So it's really there's a lot of like cultural aspect of it. I think it will never replace the joy of cooking together as a family or cooking with your loved one in the weekend or when you have time. But the biggest advantage is when you don't have time, you can still have a nice home-cooked, fresh ingredient food. So that gives the option. I think people will not really replace the joy of cooking at their home. I think it's not replaceable, but it will really give the option for us to eat healthier, like better.
So perhaps you're thinking it'll disintermediate companies that are already quite challenged, called Blue Apron, for example, where they prepackage the ingredients, but the labor is left to you. Or there's even companies where they'll sell you essentially a toaster oven with a bunch of frozen meals, and you just set the toaster oven. I forget the name of it, but I see the commercial all the time. So is this simply perhaps a more dynamic and better solution to that problem? Would that be a fair characterization?
I believe so. Just the starting of the kitchen robots journey. I think the advantage here is you really choose the ingredient that you want. You really adjust the recipes that you want. It's again a fresh food that you can have in the table. That's why I believe one of the categories that will be most impacted is the fresh, ready to eat meals. So that's one, for instance, one of the categories that we should challenge in the future. And I also see this as an opportunity for some of the industry players. The ingredients will become more important than ever. So if you are able to cook more at home, so you will be much more careful about the ingredient that you choose. You will be preferring the best one for you and then the most tasteful one. So I think really it has different implications in the industry. So, but overall, I believe that the home cooking will become more easier. And then in terms of impact on the food service, it's not a convenient game anymore. The experience part, the food itself will become even more important in the future in the food service industry because there will be more opportunities, different technologies enabling cooking at home.
So do you have any visibility? I know you said that the first iteration of this robot is going to be available in April. Do you know what the price point is on this?
The price point is right now there. You can think them as a machine around microwave size. So they are still really not the robots, but the kind of microwave machines. And the price point, if I'm not wrong, around $1,500. So it's still quite expensive for most of the families. I think it's not the first thing that people can buy immediately, but with the technology advancement, with the competition, I believe those prices will come down. And I truly see them as one of the maybe standard household appliances that we may have in the future until the real humanoid robots start to cook for us. But I believe that future, we still need some time. That's why I see these kind of solutions as a kind of intermediate solutions until we reach that point.
Now, if I heard you correctly, you were also talking about some changes that you see coming in the distribution side and even from the agricultural side. So I understand your perspective with respect to cooking at home and the emphasis on ingredients, the emphasis on freshness, this new device that will be able to do it. What I'm hearing is that this is essentially just the next step from Blue Apron, but perhaps with more complexity and dynamism, but more expensive. Do you have any thoughts in terms of sort of the impact on farming in the future or agricultural processes in general? Do you have any visions or thoughts on that with respect to where we think we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
So overall, we are not working a lot on the farming side of the food value chain. Our experience typically starts with the processing part. But I think one of the biggest challenge that we have right now is on the farming is really a topic and AI can contribute. So I'm not a farmer, an expert on the farming side. I believe both the humanoid and then the AI will make significant advancements over there. But overall, when we look at the last 50 years, I think there were certain periods that we see significant yield improvements in farming. And now, if you look at the last 10 years, those yield improvements really slowed down. So really, there is a need for next level advancement. Most likely it will come in the future through AI that we may see better improvements. But the opportunities are getting smaller over there because really in the last 30 years, 40 years, we were able to make significant improvement in how we farm and then how we make it more efficiently. So I believe we may see less improvements over there. So, but we will see more improvements maybe in terms of variety of the foods, in terms of access to the foods in the future.
So within this context of food, you shared about this at-home appliance. You'd mentioned distribution. Are there other trends or other topics that you see within this broader category that you think are relevant for people to be aware of?
So one of the things that we are really, there are two things that I believe important that will be continue to be important in the next years. One of them is the rise of the small brands. So we are seeing a lot of successful small brands that are good at understanding the customer expectations and reacting on them very quickly. We also made a recent study around it. And right now, small brand has around 42% share in the total food industry. And then private labels are, the store brand has around 14%. So in total, they are making almost 55% of the market. So all the large companies that we know are just constitute around 45% of the market. And then their share is decreasing because the small brands are really understanding the customers well and then reacting very quickly. And with the current technology, AI, with the co-manufacturers, it's becoming much more easier to reach certain scale without making major investment. I think that trend will continue and we will see much more variety in stores, in our tables. So that's an important trend.
So I can relate to part of that because at Wilco Foods, we have our own proprietary brand called Holland & York, which is a phenomenal brand. It represents about 7% of our overall sales, and it spans our hamburgers and chopped meat and bar supplies and a host of products. Mm-hmm. But from the retail perspective, how do these brands overcome the expensive challenges associated with getting shelf space? That's question one that I have. In other words, if they're selling directly to the consumer online, I get it. But there's only so much shelf space in a Whole Foods. And as you know, Whole Foods is looking to push their 365 brand. There's only so much shelf space in a grocery store. So how do these smaller brands overcome the challenges of acquiring that space?
So this is the biggest dilemma of the small brands. I completely agree, Stephen, because it's not that easy to be on the shelf. And once you are there, it's not that easy that the customers select you. So I know many customers, many companies achieved to be on the shelf, but still they couldn't get enough attention from the customers, so their sales were not really there. I think this will continue to be a challenge for a long time. I think the online and direct channel is one of those solutions, but the ones that will create the biggest difference will come from the claims that they are making. I think any brand that's really offering a bit more niche product with clear messages, from what I see, is they were the winners, even in the shelf. So if you really start to see similar products with similar messages, so it is kind of luck that customer you choose your product. But if you really target certain segments, certain that are not targeted by large incumbents or other companies, I think it can be a great opportunity. For instance, I believe in the future, we will be much more specific brands or products targeting 50 plus years old people. Now they are becoming a target segment from longevity perspective, GLP-1 offering different requirements, bringing different requirements. So I think new categories, new customer segments are arising as well. So the companies who are targeting those will be more easy to select on the shelf.
In my business experience here for 25 years, I'm familiar with a lot of startup brands. I could rattle them off. That once they achieved a certain level of impact, they were acquired, whether by Unilever or someone else. Is that still the desire of most of these companies? Because at some point they'll reach a level of scale and it'll just be attractive for them to be acquired. And I would imagine, are you seeing the larger companies continuing to do that? Or do you think that it's something that these smaller brands are resisting because they think that there's more value in just continuing to scale?
Yeah, I think the trend will continue. And I believe this year, next year, it will be even faster because from M&A perspective, the last 2 years, I would say a bit slower years compared to the others. But like we are having conversations with private equities. They are also very interested in small brand without heavy capital requirement that are successful in reaching the right customers. So right now, I think we will see a competition between the large incumbent and the private equities, which see these small brands as an opportunity to grow further. And this trend definitely will continue.
How much revenue do you think a small brand needs to have under their belt, if any, but if there is a revenue target, before they can start having meaningful conversations with private equity? How much do they need to be doing in sales traditionally before, at what point does it then become appropriate for them to have those conversations?
Yeah, there are, of course, different models that the private equities follow as well. Some of them prefer to acquire companies really at the early stage. When I say early stage, maybe $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. So, and then they acquire 10 of those, and then 2 of them are successful business for them because they are getting good return on investment from those 2, and then it closed the gap for the others. But there are also other private equities targeting higher revenue levels, which are typically 20 million plus, because they want to see that there's certain level of scale, certain level of focus. And what I also see is they are more interested in the companies that are really prove their success in certain channels or in certain regions. So as a small company, it's really hard to win in the US, in multiple states, in multiple groceries at the same time. But they were really looking for the evidence of success. So if it can be a certain state that you are really gaining 30% share in certain category, or it can be really success in certain retailers. So you are like one of the most preferred brand for them. So they're really looking for those success, I would say, rather than the revenue itself. Once they see the success, once they believe in the product, I think they're really much more interested in to invest.
Now, you've talked about one of the attributes of these brands being health. Is there also perhaps an aspirational dimension to some of these brands? Because not every food brand sort of brings itself to market based on health. I'm thinking of the liquor companies, for example. There was a real flurry of liquor companies being brought to market. I think of Casamigos Tequila because Randy Gerber, whiskey bars and all of that are our customers here. Do you have any thoughts on aspirational brands for food, or do you think it really is just boiling down to health and ingredients at this point?
I think the right area here is really what you are promising the customer. It doesn't need to be health. I think the health proposition is becoming much more important every day, but it doesn't need to be only health. We see this also in other dynamics, like protein, fibers, now very popular, and then we are seeing claims in every single product. I think that doesn't work much. So having a protein from a chips doesn't really attract the customer much. So I think the important is like, what do you promise to your customer? What is the message that you are giving to the customers? So it doesn't necessarily need to be health. It doesn't necessarily need to be protein or fibers. So it is important to identify the right customer segment and the right message to those customers. And I think there's still a lot of opportunities there. And I sometimes like see products that are really unique, but they struggle about passing the message to the customers or the retailers. So they are not able to convince the retailers that those products will sell. So these are the challenge that we see. So I believe healthy claim will stay. It is very important. It will have significant shares, but there are other plays that can be played in the market.
So I'd love to get your perspective on something. It's more of a philosophical question, but it's in direct alignment with your self-proclaimed involvement as a food futurist. One of the things that I've noticed in areas that I'm very much interested in, I'm interested in, for example, literature in addition to business. And there was an interesting interview on 60 Minutes with an author who was talking about AI-generated novels. One of the largest comic book companies, DC Comics, they do Batman. The artistic director of that entire company made a stand that they were not going to use AI-generated art or text And my point is that as AI and humanoid robots, when they come, as they become more prevalent, could it also be the case that there will be a greater premium on those authentically human events or interactions that one either can't be disintermediated by robots such as, say, live theater or live music, or that we don't want to see disintermediated? And I would argue that food and the hospitality experience may fall into that category. Do you sort of understand my question? That in a sense, as we see this rise of the deployment of AI and when we get to technologies beyond that, it could also lead to a greater demand in certain areas for those uniquely human experiences. And I would love to know your thoughts on that.
I completely agree with your point, Evan. I think AI, humanoid robots, will create the most benefit at the areas that we typically don't see in our day-to-day life. When you are producing a food, it requires still a lot of handling in the plant. And then for that, using an humanoid robots is very meaningful if you consider the talent gap that the companies have, plus the return on investment on those technology. But when it comes to social environment, social settings, I think the impact of AI and humanoid robots will be limited. So the food is, again, experience. It is not only just feeling full, and people will visit restaurants, will socialize in cafes, not because of the only to get full. So they will really look for those interactions. And that's why I believe the technology, the AI and humanoid will really bring benefit on the areas that we don't typically see in a day-to-day basis. They will simplify the work in the back end, but in our social life, we will still look for human interaction. And I believe that will remain forever.
I mean, from my perspective, I use AI a lot, and we use it a lot here at Wilco. And I take your point, and I agree with you. I think that wherever there can be an increase of efficiency, or really, to put it even simpler, whenever technology can make people's lives better and it's affordable, it will be used at scale. You know, generally speaking, humans don't introduce things into their lives that make it less enjoyable unless they have to. And business is the same. At the same time, I think your point is well taken with respect to it sort of being incredibly impactful on the things that we don't see. With respect to bringing it back to food, we've sort of gone in two directions. One, which was the sort of utilization of AI at home to prepare meals with fresh ingredients. And as I said, that may be the next step beyond what we've seen with perhaps Blue Apron or other meals. But then we've also gone in a direction that really has nothing to do with AI, which is the authenticity or the unique attributes of small brands. Do you think that as AI spreads, and you sort of alluded to this, do you think it's going to be easier for companies that want to get started in this space and bring to market a brand of food, that it'll be easier for them to do it now because there'll be more tools available, leading to more competition for products?
I see that it's already becoming easier every single day. I'm also here part of a naturally network in San Diego. And when we come together with the founders of these brands, the story that they tell is it is really much more easier to reach some of the sources that they don't have before. But the one thing still creating the challenge is the network. So you still need the people connections. You still need to know the right people to engage, right channels to approach. So there is significant dependence on the people side. So I think the back end of the work is really getting much more simple, easier. So you don't need large teams to do a lot of the things that you were doing in the past. And plus there are many organizations, many companies that are offering services with a convenient prices. So really the execution part of the work is becoming much more easy. But the connection, reaching the right channel, reaching the right people is still the biggest challenge of those investor. So if you believe that you are in the right environment, you know the right people, you have the right idea, I think you are a couple of steps ahead of the others who just has the idea and then execution power.
But it's probably the case, as you said earlier, that there's a substantial amount of liquidity that's yet to be deployed over the past 2 to 3 years, so that at some point that liquidity gets put to work, and there's a cyclical dimension to it like anything else. Is that fair?
Yes, completely. I agree. So the liquidation level is really an important factor here, and most likely in the future we will see a bit more positive direction over there, and then the small brand can also have their share on that one, really.
I've very much enjoyed our conversation. I just want to sort of move us towards the conclusion of the discussion with a thought that I would want to share and then get your opinion on, because we have listeners that are entrepreneurs from a variety of industries, but a substantial section of our listeners are in the hospitality business, hoteliers, mixologists, restaurant owners, chefs, etc. And the suggestion I would have for all of those listeners would be that every decision that I make here, and I would imagine that they make, is first and foremost reverse engineered backwards from the customer. So there have always been cases where technology has presented opportunities for efficiency and cost savings, but deployed at the wrong time or in the wrong way would lead to a horrible customer experience. The most obvious example I can think of was when those automated phone trees first came into existence. People would use them, they were not effective, they weren't efficient, and they would frustrate customers. Whereas if you had simply kept a person on the phone saying, "Hello, how can I help you?" you would have been given the absolute best technology available, if that makes sense. And I think the same is true with AI, which is another name for software or another name of technology. It's incredibly powerful, it's incredibly impactful, but I would advise people to frame their use of it within their business as to at least ask this question among others: how can I use this to enhance my customer's experience, rather than focusing on how can I maximize efficiencies? Because I think a lot of times in business, when people look at efficiency in a myopic way, they don't think about second and third order effects, which can be quite negative. I'm wondering, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Or what would your thoughts be as companies start to try to utilize AI within the broader context of established businesses with customers?
So I think what I see in my experience is aligned with the reality that you mentioned. So many times the successful AI use cases are at the operational end, at the efficiency end. So I'm also seeing that bringing the most value with the technology on the growth side, on the customer experience side is much harder, because there are certain inputs that are harder to convert to data. And then when that link is missing, so the solutions that are being implemented doesn't give the result that you are looking for. I'm also a lot of times working on the supply chain topics and operational topics. And I like those topics because it is much more tangible. When you create a result, you can immediately see the efficiency, you can immediately see the cost implication. But when it comes to growth topics, when it comes to customers, so there is not a single solution. So you need to really learn, test, learn, fail, test, learn, fail a lot to find the right solution. I think the benefit of AI on the customer side, on the growth side, is not really bringing the right solution for the first time. It's really enabling you to make more mistakes faster. Then you can learn it from that and then try again. Previously, if you have an idea, it would take maybe 3 months just to try it. Now you can try it in a week. So this gives you a lot of opportunity to improve it in the next 3 months. I think that's the benefit of AI. I think the way to look at especially on the growth side, customer side, to look at AI. Does it make sense?
I think that's a great point. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that it's a great tool to use and test things out. And I think if you are contemplating and I further agree with you that when you're using it in sort of, let's just use the phrase back of the house or with logistics, supplies, things of that nature, it's a little bit more straightforward. But I completely agree with you. It gives you an opportunity to try things quickly, learn quickly. And as long as you roll it out in a very disciplined and deliberate way, it can be helpful. I just have seen in the past, and by the way, the people who don't make this mistake will of course benefit from it, but I've seen in the past that people are quick to jump in and use something, not really thinking it through beyond the first order effect. And when you do that, you can make, substantial mistakes, but that again presents opportunities for people who don't. I'd like to end with this question, Ozan. We talked about a number of things here. Give us a picture of the biggest way you see the food consumption picture, take any part of it that you like, that you think is going to be appreciably to substantially to even radically different 5 years from now from where we are today. What aspect of food do you think is going to be the most dramatically changed 5 years out, and what will it look like?
First, I can tell you what will not change. I think the plate will not change. I don't think the plate, the way that the plate look, will not significantly change 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. So I don't believe the visions on the eating algae or other type of food in the future. I believe food is cultural, food is experience. So we will really see similar plate in the future. But what it will change is all the way that until the journey of that plate will change significantly. Maybe not in the next 5 years, but I would say within the next 10 years, with the especially human-aid integration, we believe that like a significant change will happen both on the farming side, on the processing side of the food, and also the way that we eat at home with the like human-aid robots. So it will be significantly different from today's environment, and it will bring a lot of transformation. It will impact many people, but the plate itself will remain same, but the journey behind it will significantly change, and the technology will be the main driver of it. And I also, to be honest, see a lot of opportunity on that. Like, I think we will have tendency to go to better ingredient, eating fresh, will not be that much like challenging anymore. We will have better access to those, and then it will be much more convenient to eat an healthy food. So that's why I'm really optimistic for the future. And I'm really optimistic for the food industry. Still a lot of course, gap in terms of affordability, either on countries or within the same country. I think those are the challenges that we need to overcome. But overall, I see an optimistic picture, I would say.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and I agree with you. And I, too, have an optimistic future, and I would encourage other people. A lot of times, I think people that I've spoken with, even myself, have known that sometimes people get a little uncomfortable when they talk about AI or the future or things, and they engage in a form of unproductive self-delusion, meaning that simply because they don't like something, therefore it can't grow to scale, or therefore it won't be used. And this is, of course, delusional and not helpful. I think a better approach to technology, to innovation, is to view it as an opportunity to familiarize yourself with it, to learn as much as you can, to ask constructive questions around it. And I think when people do that around this technology, they're going to be very optimistic as well, because I see a lot of opportunities and a lot of very positive things coming out of this for the hospitality industry, including but not limited to further elevating the hospitality industry into and reinforcing it as one of the most important experiences that we enjoy as humans. So I really appreciate your time, Ozan. This was an absolutely fascinating conversation. And I want to remind people, if you're interested in asking Ozan a question, or you know, that happens very often, or you want to learn more, you can check him out on LinkedIn at
Ozan Ozaskinli, or they can check out our company's website, Value Gene Consulting Group. And I'm happy to help anyone if there is any question.
That's great, Ozan. This was a real pleasure. I very much enjoyed speaking with you, and I really am glad I had an opportunity to go into these subjects with you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I really enjoyed our conversation as well. Thank you.
Terrific. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. Please be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And to learn more about Woolco Foods or Stephen Toberoff, please visit us at woolcofoods.net.